Welcome on into the Wolverine recruiting show. Clayton Sayfie here with EJ Holland. We'll break down the latest in Michigan recruiting. The Wolverines pick up a commitment in the last week. More could be coming. EJ will break that down. We will talk about a couple other top storylines in just a second. But let's start with Mason Graham, the three-star defensive tackle out of Servite High School in California. He decides to flip from Boise State, where he was committed, to Michigan. So the blue field to the maize and blue, how'd it go down, and what is he going to bring to the Wolverines?
Yeah, so this was interesting. Mason Graham was flying under the radar for a while, kind of considered a diamond in the rough out west. He actually put on about 30 pounds heading into his senior season and just started off in dominant fashion through his first two games, caught the attention of Michigan, picked up an offer from the Wolverines in late August, immediately scheduled an official visit. Michigan got him on campus and then flipped him a few days later. So it was a great job by the staff. I mean, they identified Graham early on. Actually, Courtney Morgan, Michigan's new director of player personnel, ex-Wolverine, Los Angeles native, obviously has deep ties along the West Coast, and he was able to identify him really early at Fresno State, his previous stop. So he's been recruiting Graham for a long time. Sean knows some of the coaches on his high school coaching staff at Servite, which is actually a top national program and has really developed into one of the best high school teams into the country. But Sean Nua knows a couple of guys around his recruitment. Courtney Morgan was obviously on him early. And, I mean, Michigan, let's just face it, is a better option than Boise State all around. Mason Graham talked about the tradition of the program, the academics, the opportunity to come and play in Michigan's new defensive scheme, which is, NFL based with Mike McDonald, and just his relationships that he was able to quickly build with Nua and his pre-existing relationship with Morgan all kind of led to the flip. As far as him as a player, like I said, kind of more of a diamond in the rough, late riser, but a guy that's been extremely productive. If you look at his tape, the things that really pop out about Mason Graham are his motor. I mean, just nonstop motor, his power, his frame. Like I said, he's added a lot of good weight. He's not overly athletic, but he is twitchy. And he's a guy that, again, has just been producing. And to produce in the Trinity League, which is arguably the strongest high school league in America. You have Mater Dei, you have St. John Bosco, Servite, Sierra Canyon, etc. I mean, that speaks volumes of the type of player he is. So I think it's a really nice land for the staff at a position of need. And I think he'll end up playing one of the tackle spots, not necessarily nose, but one of the tackle spots and be a really good fit there.
Yeah, I think that's a big distinction here with where exactly along the defensive line he'll play. We've seen Michigan already this season move guys around from, anywhere. Some of the outside linebackers on third downs, moving into the inside shade of the guard and things like that. So there's flexibility there. Real quick before we move on, what's next, I guess, for defensive tackle recruiting? You mentioned Mason Graham flew under the radar. He's not one of the guys at defensive tackle that we talked about quite a bit in the last several months, including guys that came in for summer visits, coming out of the Washington game. Where does Michigan go here? And I guess, where specifically do you see those guys playing on this defensive line? Because, as we mentioned, when you kind of move to this scheme, there's a lot of spots that different guys can line up at.
Well, now that you have Graham committed at more of that tackle spot, Michigan can really hone in on noses. So obviously the big mammoth 300-pounders. And Graham's up there. He's at about 290 pounds. But like I said, that's been more recent weight. He's not, the 340 that Kenneth Grant is or the 360 that Deion Walker is. I mean, those are obviously huge bodies. And that's kind of the focus, focusing in on those two guys right there specifically. So Kenneth Grant, a 3-star prospect from Indiana, really one of the most underrated prospects in the entire country. I definitely believe he's a 4-star prospect and a top 250 prospect nationally. He has been a top priority for Michigan for a long time. Recently put in a FutureCast, feel good about that. And then Deion Walker, we've talked about many times, in-state nose out of Detroit Cass Tech, was on campus several times this summer and recently came back for the game against Washington. Even though Alabama is kind of keeping him warm and thinking about bringing him in for a visit, I still think Walker's preference is to stay closer to home. So I still feel good about my future cast with him as well. If you close with Walker, you close with Grant, you flip Mason Graham, I think that's a really, really good haul.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be another good haul at defensive tackle, considering the way Michigan finished the 2021 cycle. Let's move on to a potential commitment here coming in the near future. You recently put in a FutureCast for 3-star outside linebacker Deuce Spurlock out of Alabama. Kind of what is the latest, I guess, with this recruitment, and what led you to that decision to put in the pick?
Yeah, so this has been a really, really interesting recruitment to follow. So Michigan had a flood of picks come in for Spurlock in the summer. Then the Wolverines kind of focused in on some other options. So if you remember, Michigan was really after Sebastian Cheeks, who ended up committing to North Carolina, Jeremy Patton, who ended up committing to Baylor. And now, while Michigan is still pushing hard for Lander Barton, 4-star linebacker out of Utah, he's more of a guy that's not necessarily a long shot, but a guy you're going to have to really, really work hard to land. So in order to maybe not strike out at the linebacker position, you only have one commit right now in Aaron Alexander, who's more of a project upside take. So in order to not completely strike out at linebacker, Michigan has circled back to Deuce Spurlock and is now in regular contact, and he's back on the board as a true target. When you look at the competition for Spurlock, there really isn't any other than South Carolina. So really right now, it's more of a Michigan-South Carolina battle. Auburn had him on campus for a visit, I believe a little more than a week ago, but opted not to offer. Now, if Auburn eventually offers, this is a kid from Alabama, if Auburn eventually offers, that'll kind of change up his recruitment. But as it stands right now, it seems like Michigan has the edge over South Carolina. I've heard there's some optimism around Ann Arbor, and he is looking to make a decision relatively soon, which could bode well for Michigan. But, I think Spurlock's an intriguing athlete, another high upside guy. It gives you two high ceiling prospects at inside linebacker if you land Spurlock, if you pair him with Alexander.
So keep an eye on Deuce Spurlock, a good name as well. He'd be part of that all-name team. Let's move on to our last thing. You were on the road over the weekend, checking out Michigan edge rusher commit Cavante Henry, a guy that not many people have seen, a guy that I think people are intrigued to hear about. What did you glean from watching him in person? And for the YouTube viewers, we got some clips that we're rolling right now.
Yeah, Cavante Henry, watching him on the sideline, it was kind of funny. Like the thought that I had the whole game was like, man, this guy has so much athletic ability, but he has no clue what he's doing. And he's so raw. Looking at the clips, you can just see that he's a guy that comes downhill in a hurry. He doesn't really necessarily play assignment football. He's just a guy that's out there playing with a headhunter mentality, but he has great speed, great length, a frame to add a lot of weight. This is a guy that can be a dominant edge rusher at 245, 250 pounds. He has the frame to carry that much weight. Really athletic. You see him here carrying the ball, playing running back as well. But again, he's just really raw from a technical standpoint. I think, learning the intricacies of Mike Macdonald's scheme will be big, but more so it'll be physical development, getting in that weight room with Ben Herbert. Right now it is high school. He really doesn't have any facilities. When I went out to Lusinger this offseason, their weight room was in a parking lot. So he's never really had an actual weight room. He's never actually had a strength and conditioning program. This is a guy that was also kind of hidden out in California that Courtney Morgan identified while at Fresno State. Told Michigan about him. They pushed and they landed him this summer. He's pretty locked in with the Wolverines. Nothing to really be concerned about with his commitment. But just one of the more interesting prospects this cycle. Really, really high ceiling, but also a really, really low floor. Again, a lot will depend on his development at the next level. And also saw a couple of underclassmen targets, across the field from Cavante Henry was Tio Afalava, a 2023 defensive lineman from California. More of an edge rusher guy that could add some weight and be a tackle. He's a prospect that Michigan is evaluating closely. And before I made the trip out to Los Angeles, I was actually here in Chicago, went down to the south side to see Rivals 250 wide receiver Malik Elzy. He's a guy that Michigan offered first, and he's really, really high on the Wolverines, looking to visit. Big physical receiver. We haven't seen a lot of speed and space here lately as Michigan's been pounding the football, but they have utilized bigger wide receivers, and I think Elzy kind of fits that mold, and he'll be a big target for next cycle. Definitely one to keep an eye on moving forward.
Definitely. So there you have it. That's our recruiting show. EJ, any final words on Michigan football recruiting for this week?
I think we could potentially see some good news. I think Michigan has a couple of commitments in the background. Maybe you'll see them go public. Who knows?
There you go. A little teaser. So stay tuned at thewolverine.com to get all of that coverage. Love working at thewolverine.com with our great team. So check us out there. Stay tuned for some possible commitments. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel as well. We will check in with thoughts on those if they come about.